This is the Michael Bryan Show. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show, and today I am joined with Mike Radoor, who's a self-sabotage and character transformation expert. Quite a mouthful. But he's also the best-selling author of Above Average and Man Up as well. So we're discussing achieving your greatest desires as a man, but also why is it possible for everyone as well, not just those of us that are more masculine. So Mike, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Michael. Happy to be here.
So let's start with you, really. I'm curious about where you came from. What's your story?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I'm born and raised in Denmark, in a not a big city, not a small city, but a city called Odense. And then when I became a little bit older, I think I was around 18, I moved to Copenhagen. And in Copenhagen, I was for a couple of years where I kickstarted a business. But before that, I was a bartender. Then I became a club manager, and then we started off our first business, which today is a $300+ million business called Minto.com. So I was in Denmark until I was 23, and then I traveled for 7 years around the world where we were expanding our business, which is an online marketplace. So for you guys, it looks like an online fashion shop, but Minto is more like a collective of mom and pop stores. So we just connected them and then we sold their stuff, and that grew into a big business. And this is a short story, Michael. And then on that note, I checked out of that business and became a multi-millionaire when I was 29. And then from 29 to around 30, 35, I lived a different life. I lived the life of a rock star, and I fell in love with the partying, and I fell in love with the expensive stuff, and that also became my downfall. And today, I'm coaching men in changing their character, and in all reality, I'm coaching men to grow out of their boy psychology and into a more man psychology, and that's all I do today.
I imagine the temptation of having the ability to do whatever it is that you wanted to do. You know, you mentioned that you were partying, you were enjoying yourself, you were doing whatever it is that you wanted. That must yield its own lessons as well. You learn so much from being able to do whatever you wanted.
But it wasn't even doing whatever I wanted. I went to the extremes. You know, I just wanted to win, and I wanted to win validation, and that brought me on to path of destruction, right? So when you suddenly get a lot of money in your hands, you know, money just amplifies who you already are. And at that point in my life, I was still an insecure boy in many ways. And when I got all these money in my hands, that was my way of trying to validate myself for being good enough. This is something I can only know in retro perspective. And that was the death of me, you know. And 2 years ago, so I'm 39 today, I'm 40 this April. 2 years ago, I had $1,000 to my name and a newborn baby girl. And I was still a weekend drug addict, and hadn't really taken that responsibility we're supposed to do when we are young boys growing into men. And that period of partying wasn't doing what I wanted. It was more, I have more means to prove that I was good enough.
Do you find then that a lot of people would tend to fill that gap in their life, whether it's mentally or physically, where we're trying to look for the thing that's missing, and then whatever comes along, we take it in hope that that fills it?
Yeah, you can say it all comes back to, you know, it all comes back to that, especially I'm talking boys here. It all comes back to boys. So let's just take time back a little bit. In the old ancient days, there was a ceremony, there was a ritual for a boy to become a man. So that was typical a ritual where the leader of the pack, he will see as soon as the boy showed sexual interest, he would point the boy out and he would say it's time to kill the boy, and they will take him into a ceremony where some parts of the world, they will take him into a 24-hour ceremony where they will put him through immense pain, and also give him some hallucination and give him a wisdom, wise man with him that will transcend his consciousness into a man before he was 18. And when we're looking into the world today, those rituals, they are dead. They don't exist. And over the last couple of 100 years, we have developed into a consumer, convenient, pleasure chasing society where a lot of men in today's world are confused because they don't have that strong father to teach them because he doesn't have those tools. And then we have, a big rising of the women that wanted to have equality, and they ended up protesting more that they probably would protest. And I love that they got equality, by the way. That was very beautiful. But they started then to, also have young girls in adult female bodies where there was no men that could lead them into actually relaxing their feminine. So where we are in today's world is so different from when it was many years ago, which is why I see many people, they can't control their temptation. They simply haven't gotten the tools to resist temptation.
That's a really interesting concept as well, because if you think about it, I mean, it actually took me back to something I heard a while back. Tough people create easy times, and then easy times create weak people, and it's almost like a cycle where we need to get to a point where we're getting the strong people back, the leaders, the people that know right from wrong, the people that aren't going to give in to these temptations, and we're kind of waiting for the next part of the cycle.
Yeah, well, if you just look at the world, right, we have so many times. So we used to raise our kids ourselves. But in today's world, we don't raise our kids ourselves because they are so exposed to media, right? And a lot of parents who is busy working and haven't gotten the tools to actually raise their kids in the ways that they're raised by them, they hand them over with an iPad. And now they're being raised through YouTube. And everything is a transaction. YouTube wants viewers. And, so we're not raising our kids anymore. So that means in the world that we're living in today, we're living in a world where consumption is the most important thing. Just look at the dopamine economy. Like everything that has to do with releasing our dopamine, that's $1 trillion business. That's food, alcohol, porno, entertainment, and I could go on. It's a huge industry that understands that we humans, we love entertainment, right? And if we're looking into today's world where we stand, look at the incel communities of these young boys who is lost, and many of them are 25 years old, and they mean that they feel that women have too high expectations and they blame women for these things. And then we have authorities popping up, like, for example, Andrew Tate, that pops up everywhere. But if you look close to Andrew Tate, you can also see there is a lot of boy psychology within him, but very well articulated. So it's very confusing for young boys to know what is a man and what is a man supposed to do, what is the function of a man. And I was one of those guys that didn't understand that, and that became my destruction.
What would you say are the main differences there? The idea of growing out of the boy within us and then becoming a man, what are the main distinctions between the two?
So this is a multitude, right? So when we are kids, we grow up in different phases, and we have to find our way. So for example, when we are boys, so boys, they develop themselves over a period of time, right? And if they don't have a strong father leading them, well, it's up to everything around him to try to figure out what that means to him. And there is many types of people. You can't put people in a box. But what it means when you are a man, in my opinion, a man is a person that takes 100% responsibility for who he is and what he does. If we're looking into the role, a function of a man should be able to protect, provide, and preside. And there's a lot of politics going on in the world where, there's a lot of young boys dressed up as men. They start to control and dominate the women. And now the women start to say, what the heck are you doing? And that's not what a man does. So the entire point of these, let's call them polarities of feminine energy and masculine energy, is that the only thing that can make a feminine energy relax into the feminine is a strong, grounded masculine energy. And we have a lot of men in today's world who still have boy psychology within them, which makes the women more crazy because they don't feel they can be led. That doesn't mean controlled or dominated, not at all. It just means lead. We are born leaders. And we are born leaders for the fact that we have the physical function and we have the testosterone. We have a lot of different functionalities. So we have an equal worth, but different functionalities. And that's why there's so much, in my opinion, gender confusion. And there's a lot of things going on in the world today that we have never seen before in human history. And I believe that's because the polarities are being mixed up.
Do you find then that it's the men that would have to lead first in order for things to calm down, or would it work both ways, do you think?
No, but so let's just look at men. So a man is born with testosterone, and a man is born with a physique that can grow strong. Most men in today's world are fat or pathetically weak because we're not using it. And if a man cannot lead himself, there's no way he can lead anyone else. So let's track it back to the Stoics. So in the old days in Rome, where the Stoics, or in Greek, or in those areas, when the Stoicism started to arise, that was because when, the primary function and skills of a man was strength, courage, and, survival skills or fighting skills. Those were the ones who was guarding the perimeter of the perimeters of the cities. But in the middle of the cities, when there was nothing to fight, now we had to figure out another way. And that was, to conquer ourselves, to have honor and respect within us. So it's all being developed over time. But if you're looking thousands of years back, men has always been the ones that was hunting and providing and protecting, right? And today, we don't have that anymore. But the energy still remains the same. It might be different in different ways, but the energy doesn't remain the same. So if you're looking into today's men, how men has gotten confused. For example, I posted something on my Instagram the other day, and I said, if you don't teach your son to respect women, I will teach my daughter to break jaws. And I did that on purpose, just to see how much of this boy psychology that would pop up. So that post went through, I think it had 3-4 million views and more than 70,000 likes and comments. And you could just see how a lot of boy psychology is showing up on that, saying, hey, if women don't respect men, we don't respect them. But that's backwards, because if you are a real man, you're physically stronger. Thereby, you should be mentally stronger. And if a woman doesn't respect you, you put boundaries, you walk away. There's no way you should, no way in human history that a man should touch a woman. It just lies natural in us. But the confusion is so big in the world that the best way a man can develop into a man is when he finally feels confident with himself. And the only way a man can feel confident within himself is when he have conquered himself. And conquered himself has to do with physique, has to do with skills, and has to do with courage. And then he has to learn honor and respect.
Do you find then that it's a need that comes about? So with all this confusion and all of this, I guess we're all mixing together, so to speak, that something has to give, that we need to be led somewhere, we need someone to go after these different roles, and I suppose in all the confusion, someone, whether it's a man or a woman or whatever the case is, someone will step into that. It doesn't really matter. But obviously we're built for it. So in a lot of ways, we're handing that responsibility over.
Yeah, so I think we should use what is naturally given to us. That's what I think we should. But, in today's world, men, they are still playing video games and smoking weed, and they are wanking to porn, and they are insecure, and they cheat on their women. Not that we haven't done that in the past life, but we have a very hard time understanding what a man is. And that's because we have not gotten that development. And in the moment, you'll see that as well. So in the moment you have a grounded, mature, masculine energy, you will automatically become very attractive to females. Automatically. And that doesn't have to do necessarily only with your physique, but it has to do with your energy. When you are grounded, when you are calm, you can say when you are a disciplined savage, or if you are able to, let's just use the term, if you're able to hurt someone, but you choose actively not to do it, neither verbally or psychologically or physically, you become attractive because you have all that power that you have found a way to master. So for a man to develop into a real man, it comes down to ego mastery. It comes down to self-mastery. And let's be fairly honest. Everyone in the Western world, which are born men, have the opportunity to become a leader. Everyone has the opportunity to become a leader. But it all comes down to a mindset. And we are raising kids into become a victim mindset. And that's what the capitalistic system also loves, because the capitalistic system wouldn't work if we had chiefs all the time, right? We need people who are workers. So the entire system is just built to, in my opinion, fuck up that natural order that we used to live in. We are neither used to live in so big societies, right? So we're not used to live in millions of people in cities. So I think the solution to this is very hard to discuss. I don't think I have that solution, but I do have the solution for a man to become confident and calm and grounded in himself and lead his family at least. And that is to really learn how to master himself.
The first thing that I thought of actually was this idea of being more self-aware. Like the more you know yourself, you know what you're good at. As an example, does that come into it, do you think? Is it more of the more you know about yourself, the easier this whole thing is?
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's so developing yourself spiritually and mentally is an awareness journey. That's 100% what it is. And on that awareness journey, men has to undergo different processes than women has to, and that comes down to our natural function. So, for example, the clients that I'm working with, Michael, is often men who break their own promises. They don't feel proud about themselves. These high achieving men. So high achieving men, they have done well in their business, but something is missing. They keep being scattered in their private life. They keep doing things where they end up in shame. They keep doing things they end up regretting. They keep doing things that they lose their confidence and their self-trust. And that's because, we have made it into a competition. We believe in today's world that just because you make a lot of money, then you are an alpha. But that has very little to do with being an alpha. Alpha is more like an energy, if we should use that expression. But if you take two different boys and you put two different boys in two different environments, and you put one boy in an environment with a very strong father figure who has high moral standards, very clear life values, very clear non-negotiables, very clear standards to himself, you'll see a boy growing into be a confident boy, versus if you take a boy being raised by his mom, who does not have that masculine presence by nature, you'll see a boy growing up being more insecure.
So is it in some ways about the environment that you spend your time in?
It absolutely is. It is so, but it doesn't mean you can't do that. Your environment doesn't dictate the rest of your future. That's also what I preach, right? That's why I'm a character transformation coach. So I did this. I grew up in the worst environment when it comes to being a masculine man. I was, grew up with my dad was mentally ill. He wasn't present. My mom was raising me, and my mom she was lacking empathy because of her wounds. I love them both to death. And she got a younger boyfriend that didn't take a father role. So I was on a leash and not understanding what all this masculinity, and when I talk about masculinity, I'm talking about an energy. I'm talking about a presence, right? I'm not talking about a certain look or a certain thing I'm talking about an energy. And I had to crash completely to become a father, and luckily look myself in the mirror and realize for once in my life, Jesus Christ, I wouldn't be proud or feeling safe if my daughter married a man that I was at that time. So I embarked on a very deep journey to figure out who do I want her to marry.
Do you find that in some ways it's like a comfort or a safety that breeds all of this? Like if we get too comfortable, we start to fall into, let's just say, bad habits. Where if we have this element of progression, maybe we commit to a struggle every so often, because, you used to hear a lot, didn't you, Mike, where suffering builds character in some ways, that you build that mental strength of overcoming something difficult, when I imagine most haven't had that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all comes down to a survival mechanism, right? So what really made us able to sit in front of this channel and communicate with each other was that our ancestors, they were really relying on instincts. And one of our survival mechanisms is to seek towards familiarity, seek towards comfort. So that's a big one in us, which the dopamine economy has figured out. There's so much money in not giving people that manual to, because if we resisted temptation, we wouldn't be good consumers, would we? So when we grow up, we have to understand that one of our survival mechanisms is to seek towards what makes us feel good. That's not automatically what makes us be good. And that's why in the world right now, we are in such a lack of educating young men or young fathers to really get that resistance to pleasure and comfort. We have a world right now where most of the suicides that's done is by men. And most of the cases in the world right now, we have men who is lost and doesn't know what to do with all that energy that they have, because they never taught it. And what they do, they pour it into numbing themselves instead of facing themselves. And we end up getting overweight, and we end up getting disappointed at ourselves, and we end up having a bad sex life. We end up getting low confidence. And then it's much easier to dive into a World of Warcraft game where you can have an avatar while you can eat your pizza. That's such a big part of the problem. So we have an entire society that is constructed for a downfall because they want us more to consume than to actually create order in the world.
So how would we, in some ways, start to shift in a more productive direction with this? So if you're a man that wants to evolve, or you want to grow, or you want to be a leader, or at least be able to lead yourself more effectively, how could we do that? Where do we start? Where does the boy in us start down this path?
It's a million-dollar question, Michael. That's a good question. So I believe that every man, every boy, every young man, or every boy psychology, if they don't have any of this knowledge, because we learn in four phases. First, we don't know that we don't know. So there's a lot of men who listens to this for the first time who will be like, holy shit, I never thought about it like that. And we have to wake up and now know that we don't know. You can imagine yourself when you're a kid, first time you go on your bike, you don't know that you don't know. Then you crash. Oh shit, now I know that I don't know. So I believe a lot of the young boys in today's world, they have to crash. But the problem is that they never will crash because we have societies that are so safe. We have societies that makes it much easier to glide into comfort and pleasure. So they will never crash until it's too late. So that's why, for example, my social media, even my book, Man Up, that's a wake-up call where I use my, vulnerable story. I talk about all my mistakes, all the drugs that I did, all the audios that I just come clean with everything. And then I give them a path back with the ancient knowledge that I got together with behavioral psychology and stuff. So the best way we can do this is by, some people steps up and starts to yell. And just to tell you that when you start to yell like I'm yelling, I'm getting a lot of haters because I'm triggering parts in them. For example, if I go out and I say, hey, it's not normal to be fat, then I get a lot of resistance, right? Because there's a lot of fat people that feel triggered, but they know I'm right. And I'm getting a lot of hate. So we need a lot of strong leaders who is not out there shaming, but is out there informing with the truth. And that really demands, strong people to do that.
You can see it quite a bit as well, where there be people, they're trying to step back from difficult situations, whether they're putting responsibility onto something else, or maybe just outright denying any part that they played in a particular situation. You mentioned earlier as well that it can almost eat away at you, this whole idea of stepping back all the time and never really owning up to anything or taking responsibility for anything. In my head, that eats away at your brain as a person. You can't really trust yourself anymore, so why would you make decisions? Why would you take a particular path if no sense of self? You don't know if you can make it, you don't know if you can follow through. History would say, well, you failed here, you didn't do this, you didn't commit to this, you didn't commit to that. Why would you believe anything else?
Yeah, so that's the thing. So for example, let's take it's a good one. Let's take one of the ancient rituals in Japan. They sent their kids out on what they called misugi. So the father's most important task was to teach and educate his kid to have strength, courage, and survival skills. And when the time came when he had to transition his consciousness into being a man, he would have enough training by his father, hopefully, to be sent out in the wilderness. And he was not allowed to come back within a given time frame. And that time frame would be long enough for him to be able to die. When he came back, he would now have humbled himself, and he would have gained confidence, and he would have used all the skills of his father. So he felt now that he could handle himself. And there's none of these rituals going on in the world anymore. So for example, I've constructed what I call the Man Up framework, which is a 90-day process that hundreds of high-achieving men is going through right now, where they really find themselves and they change their perspective and they transcend their consciousness into have this groundedness. And we need more opportunities in the world for that to happen. What I really see as a problem, which is the problem I had, is that if you don't have those tools, you as a man will end up with what I call self-sabotaging behavior, which is based on the root cause is low self-worth. When you have low self-worth, you tend to do things more that gives you pleasure than things that makes you know that you are doing good. So this is not a moral compass. It's more like an inner blueprint that all men are born with. And if we don't get the opportunity to test that, we will never really feel that we are men.
what would be some of the ways that we could test it? Do you have any examples or stories of someone
Yeah.
that wants to do this? How could they?
So the first step is to become, objectively, brutally honest to yourself. So that is to really look yourself in the mirror and face yourself for who you are. Face yourself for all your bad behaviors. Face yourself from everyone that you have hurt. Face yourself from all the potential you have chosen the easy way instead of just taking that way that we need to take to achieve something. I'm not talking money, I'm talking to achieve self-respect. So the first step is to be objectively honest to yourself and be given an amount of questions that forces you to confront yourself. That will, in my book, Man Up, that comes out in March, that will be a framework for that. And the next thing you'll do, as soon as you can face yourself, you now know what you need to work on, right? So that's the awareness. You need to become aware that you need what you need to work on. And you will never become aware if you hang around with people that is just like you. You have to find peers or material, which is my book is a roadmap for that, where you can face yourself. And the second step has to be implemented really quick. That's where you build self-respect. So I found a ritual that made me create self-respect. So I just figured out what is the hardest thing I can do in the morning and without hurting myself. And what I did for 1 year, for 365 days straight, Michael, was I woke up 4 a.m. Waking up 4 a.m. is tremendously disgusting. It's so early because I have to go early to bed. And the first thing I did in the morning was I dived into a cold plunge. First thing, dived into a cold plunge. And everyone who wants to do that, please check your heart. Don't just do that. But young men does not have heart problems often. But straight into a cold plunge. And the next thing I did, I started studying books about masculinity. I started studying book about history of masculinity, masculine energy. And the next thing I did that could be terrible for me was to go to the gym. And then throughout the entire day, just make sure I ate clean food because I'm constantly tempted from all this sugar. I just ate clean food because it was hard. And then I focused every single day on those things that I had discovered that I needed to work on to stop them from happening. So being wise is more about what you shouldn't do rather than what you should do. So if you understand what you need to work on and you have a little path on that and you can force you to do things that is hard, you automatically will gain what I call confidence. Confidence is just trust to yourself. So when you start to be in full conscious congruent alignment, when you do what you know you should be doing, you gain confidence, you gain self-trust. And when you start to gain self-trust, you gain self-worth, self-esteem. And the funny part here is, Michael, limiting beliefs. We all go through development through our years where we get beliefs of what we're capable of, right? So that's a belief, our capabilities. And every time you don't do what you know you should be doing, that could even be cleaning up your desk. That could be, holding the door for that lady because you feel that's the right thing to do. If you don't do it, now your subconscious will know that you're the guy that doesn't do what you're supposed to do. So you will literally develop a belief that says, I'm the guy who doesn't follow through, or I'm the guy who give up too early, or I'm the guy. And if you have that foundational belief, anything on top of that becomes hard to achieve versus if you have a foundational belief that says, I'm the guy that can face anything. I might not succeed, but I will always come back. I will face anything. Now limiting beliefs will disappear.
What I really like about that, Mike, actually, is how practical it is. Like the idea of, okay, I'm going to do things that are difficult because then that elevates my self-worth. It's not really an approach of just change your inner dialogue or just tell yourself that you can do these things because then every time you don't, if anything, it reinforces the opposite. But I like how practical it is.
Yeah, it took me a little while. So I've been writing a few books, and when you go on these journeys and you're passionate about it, you figure out ways. So my way is not the only way, but it's a very fast way that really makes you go through that. It transcends your boy psychology into man psychology. Carl Jung spoke a lot about this. Alfred Adler spoke a lot about this. And the interesting part about this is that a lot of these, we have a world that talks a lot about Freudian ways of therapy, right? The entire psychology world is based on Freud's theories. But you'll see that a lot of guys with traumas comes from they have not been able to transcend their boy psychology into a man. Because in the moment you have to face yourself and there's no other way going through it. The obstacle is the way, they said, the Stoics. When you go through it, your trauma dies. it just dies. And if you are taken on a path where you have a path to follow that someone else has taken, like that was the rituals, right? The rituals was paths that was already taken and they had worked. And you take that path, you're also more comfortable. And that's what I'm doing in my coaching, right? I take them on a 90-day journey, which I call the Man Up Reset. And it's incredible what these guys are achieving, man. It's unbelievable.
It sounds to me as well like you have to, like, in order to confront yourself, you need to get quite vulnerable with yourself and really honest with who you are and what you've been doing essentially for however long. And is there a power to being vulnerable? Is there a way of contributing to, okay, I want to be more masculine, I want to be more powerful and influential? Does being vulnerable fit into that?
Oh, absolutely. Vulnerability is a big masculine power. That's a mature masculine who's vulnerable. That's a mature masculine who dares to be vulnerable. I don't have a problem saying to the world what I did. Yeah, I took a lot of cocaine. Yes, I was on private jets having sex. Yes, I was there. Yes, I cheated on this. That does not mean that that was accepted behavior. But in my world, there's a lot of shame going on in the world, which is one of the lowest frequencies there is. I don't have shame in me anymore because I know that I'm a human being and I own my mistakes. I own my mistakes and I correct them. So how can I have shame about something I did when I didn't know it? I can't. I can have shame about something that I knew I shouldn't do and I did it and I don't correct it. You can be a conspiracy theory guy here and you can also say, well, the Freudian model, I'm also criticizing that in my book. I'm pretty sure I'm going to hear a lot from that. He's a brilliant guy. He was a brilliant guy. But he keeps going back to the problem where we should just be aware about the problem and then focus on who we want to be tomorrow. Who do I want to be today? So when we wake up in the morning, who do I want to be? Okay, how do I act like that? Shit, I don't dare to act like that. Okay, how do I get courage? Okay, I get courage. So when you take a very practical step-by-step method and you work on the basics first, the rest comes easy.
Do you find as well, like, if you can commit to things, that helps with other things? If you look at trying to take responsibility and confronting yourself and hopefully being more self-aware, do you find that that bleeds over into other areas? Like if you can commit to, I don't know, maybe a healthy diet, or I know you committed to the cold plunge every morning. Did that help with other things?
Absolutely. What you do somewhere, you do anywhere. So it all comes down to, Michael, it all comes down to life values. Like most men doesn't understand that. Nobody has really embodied and understood what, and I'm talking because, I didn't know that. And if I did, I was a quite intelligent guy who built a $300 million business. And if I don't know that, there's a lot of men who doesn't know that. And the core principles, step number 3 is that we talk about, your identity in action. So you can only make decisions based on your perspective, right? You can only make decisions based on your perspective. You can't make decisions that you don't have a perspective on. So you act automatically on that. And your perspective has a foundation of your, and this is something we're not aware about. What is my non-negotiables in life? What is my life principles? What is my life values? What are my standards to myself? And that's what I call your identity in action. And that's also what I call in my book, the broken systems. I give you an example, Michael. So I grew up in a smaller ghetto in Denmark. And when I grew up in a ghetto, there was some rules in the ghetto. And one of them, there was an eye for an eye. So if this boy over here, he touched one of our friends, we had to respond. That was what we had to. So that became an eye for an eye. But that stuck with me up until I was 27. I could, if someone touched someone that I cared about, I would be the first one going. But I couldn't keep working like that because that was a broken system. It wouldn't give me any good. That was more like my child boy psychology, the hero, right? If you start working on yourself, on your core, where every decision is taken from, it affects everything. And that's what I call the life return on investment, right? When we go into coaching, we often, let's say we buy a coach and he's a coach that can teach us how to get more revenue. There you have a very tangible return on investment. When you go into a transformational coach like me, we don't have tangible results. But we do have a life return on investment because what you do somewhere, you do anywhere. So if you can hold the line and you can have emotional maturity, that will affect your business relationships, your marriage, your kids. It will affect everywhere. And that's why, that's why I say the real business is you. You might build the business, but you didn't build the man. And that's so important in the world we live in today.
I'd be really keen to learn a bit more about this idea of principles as well. Like, as a man, you've got a code, you've got principles, you've got rules that you stick to. What are some of the, let's just say, effective ones that we should embody? And maybe there are some from when we were younger that we need to let go of. So, what are your thoughts on that?
But I can mention one of them is that I have a principle that's called purpose over pleasure. That's your rule. Let's say you're a man in the modern world. There's a lot of people who is masturbating that masturbates all the time and it destroys their marriage. So if you have a rule now, purpose over pleasure, then you'll be like, fuck, but I don't have a purpose. Good, let's find a purpose. What's your purpose? Right? And now you get that purpose. Okay, now I feel a pull in me that I wanna masturbate. I wanna wank. But I have a marriage. That's more important. Fuck the wanking. My marriage is more important. Then you stop that. And let's say that now you want to eat shit food, right? And there's nothing wrong in eating shit food in moderation. I just don't support that in my life. Now you have purpose over pleasure. What is your purpose? Well, if your purpose is to come out and have a long life and live in a strong physique and have a strong physique, well, you know that there is a limit to that shit food. Okay, purpose over pleasure. Now, let's say you want to go home because we're swamped into this. And now you are tired, you've been at work all day, all you want to do is just pop a bottle of a beer and watch some fucking Netflix. Okay, then there's a rule, purpose over pleasure. This is pleasure. What is my purpose here? So that's one principle that really got me far. And that's also one of the principles that I'm coaching my men in.
Are there any rules that, let's just say, maybe they've been instilled into younger generations that we should let go of? Is there anything that you can think of?
So we all have rules, right? We run by rules, but it's not rules that we are aware about. So what you should do, you should look into areas of your life and figure out where don't you feel that you're living it out. And then you have to track it back and figure out what rules am I living by. For example, one of my principles is that, what I fear I must do with a rational mind. What I fear I must do. So here I am. I want to become one of the greatest coaches in the world, and I'm fearing people's criticism. I must do it. I gotta do it because you can't become a big coach without having enemies. It's just not possible. You can't be loved by everyone. You shouldn't be loved by everyone. You should have a polarized situation there. If you have rules that you need to make, I would say it's more up to figuring out where in your life are you causing problems for yourself. So I'm a firm believer that any young man wants to be financially independent, wants to have a great physique. I have never met a fat guy that lost his weight and gained a six pack and became solid in his business, became a good leader that ever regretted it. I've never met a guy who regretted it. It never happened. So if you're looking into the life that you have and you figure out, okay, where am I holding myself back? Where do I feel weak? Where do I not feel proud? Here you got to figure out what are those rules. And then you can meet a guy like me. You can read the book that comes out in March. And here's an example of that. So I've went on a journey myself. It took me 3 years to collect this framework, right? And it's a proven framework that works for everyone that goes through it. We have a 100% bulletproof case when people go through it. And that took me 3 years. So what you can do is you can invest in yourself. You can invest in books. You can start reading. Fuck your Netflix. Fuck your PlayStation. Start reading. But people, they don't do that anymore. People, they don't study that anymore. And I learned that if I have a problem, I buy myself a mentor. If I don't have the money for that, okay, I figure out what books do they read, and I started reading those books. And that's a great place to start.
It sounds like there's a real mission that you've found, Mike, where you're trying to encourage people to, the only way of wording it, it's almost like you're trying to redefine the whole idea, and we need to start again. Because it sounds like we've gone so far the other way.
Yeah, but you're right. So yeah, I got a purpose when my daughter was born, and I realized I was a dickhead. So that was, so most of my content is just directed to my old me. But in all reality, I see it as this. So you and I, Michael, we are Homo sapiens. So our brain is 200,000 years old, approximately 300,000. It hasn't fucking changed, very little. And within the last 100 years of those, let's say 300,000 years, which is 0.0, what, 03%? 0.03% or more. Our brain has existed in such a little percentage of the time of human history in a world that has never been more convenient, never been more comfortable. And our brain can't figure that out. It just haven't learned that, which is why people are, funny enough, getting more depressed, getting fatter than ever, dying of all kinds of lifestyle diseases caused by themselves because their brain can't, we don't know. It's a survival mechanism to seek towards that. And I think it's time, instead of just inventing things you can inject in your belly, it's just, and you can lose weight. That's just scratching the surface. I think it's time to give people the wisdom, the knowledge that they can actually start to act on it and live a life where they feel they are in alignment. And when you feel you are in alignment, you don't give a fuck about being perfect. You just figure out, okay, this is me today. Who do I want to be today? And there's a lot of people who has lost purpose in life. I'm not religious, but I studied the Bible. And one of the greatest purposes that's given to us in the Bible is to use the God-given gifts that you have to serve others. And that means you always have a project, which is you. How can I improve me so I can serve others better? And here comes the ego mastery, right? Because the world is also about me, 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 me. And I transcended that into say, what can I give my daughter? Man, fuck, I'm giving so many people things, just giving my daughter that.
It's actually making me think of trying to make people use their brains more, use their heads more, because you mentioned convenience and comfort, and it reminds me of years ago when, if you don't use your body, then you will lose it. And it happens whether we get active or not. As we age, it happens anyway, and we can do some things to prevent it or slow the decline. And I'm starting to get this feeling where it's a mental thing as well. You got to use your heads, you got to use your brains and figure out your life and overcome struggles to keep things growing and keep things moving forward.
Yeah, but come on, man. Life's not going to stop until you end it, right? And you can decide how bad you want it to end. When we are born, man, we are born geniuses. And the parent's job is to protect that genius, but we don't. And, the best thing you can do for yourself is just to figure out, okay, Homo sapiens, how did they function well? Good. A great amount of, and these stupid things we have to tell people, hey, you're going to feel good when you are in a good shape. It's stupid things, but people don't want to do it because it's hard. It's hard because we don't have to survive anymore. And I have not met a guy who is 45 years old, who is in a good physical shape that doesn't like it. I'm 40 myself. I've never been in a better shape. And I'm not saying that every man who's in a good shape is a good man. There's a big difference from being good at being a man and being a good man. But, taming your physique could be your first test. And, if you go on the beach and you take off your shirt and you're a chubby white guy and you drink too much beers, you don't fucking like standing next to me. But that's your problem. But it's easier to hate on me and put me in a box, put me in a box and say, it's a egocentric motherfucker. No, you egocentric because you keep filling yourself with shit that you hate. So the approach I took, Michael, I took a controversial approach to wake people up. So that means my Instagram is strategically constructed to talk about things that is the opposite of what the world is saying. And when people look deep enough in it, I'm actually just saying the truth. And I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just saying the truth. And I get a lot of high achieving men who respect that. And working with me, for example, you need to have an amount of commitment. Otherwise, you're going to give up. So you see that over and over again. People, they start a fucking fitness coach that is a $300 a month fitness coach. And after a month, they give up. But if you pay $10,000, now there's a consequence. If you pay $25,000, there is a consequence. And I'm the guy who shows you the consequences. And that's what we don't have. We don't understand consequences. And we don't have sense of urgency. And that's the problem.
That's a very good point, actually. I'm a firm believer in consequences, and if you make the wrong decisions, then in some ways you need to start feeling these consequences, otherwise you won't change anything. When you mentioned the idea of getting fitter and healthier and building something that you'd be proud of, I found as well that it's not just about the physique, it's about the mental journey and the mental transformation as well. Like, by doing those things, you build more than just the body, you build the mind as well.
Well, in the old days, nobody could use you if you were a weakling. Nobody could use you. As a man, nobody could use you if you were weak. It was just the natural order. They couldn't use you until cities were invented. Then you can use your skills in other ways. So we are also born with different starting points, right? Some men are taller, some men, and I respect that. So we can now use our skills and feel useful. I think a man feels good when he feels useful. But, at least take care of your physique. That's where you can be very useful as a guy, your physique. And yeah, I'm not protesting about that. I'm talking to a very, very small little audience who is ready to embark on that journey. And my job is to wake them up through all my content and my books. And when you're ready, you can come to me or come to someone else. So one of the guys I really respect a lot is Jordan B. Peterson. He's a very wise guy who also talks the truth. And I think it's really needed in the world that we have some mature masculine people that dares to say the truth, so we don't have immature masculine like Andrew Tate that says partly truth but has a lot of boy psychology in him, who is misleading the boys.
How could we lead them in the right way then? What sort of principles would you like people to stick to, or at least try to embody? Are there any things that you can share that could help these people?
Well, so if you are a father, you have to understand your biggest job is to make sure that your kids is ready for the world. And if you can't lead yourself as a father, start there. Because your kids don't do what you say, they do who you are. They literally do who you are. And your standards to yourself becomes the standards in your family. What you tolerate with yourself becomes what the family tolerates. So as a father, which is also a big chunk of my clients, I would say invest in yourself and get yourself aligned. Now, there will be a lot of fathers listening to this now saying, no, no, I don't need that. I don't care. That's selfish if you have kids. That's so selfish. So I had a client of mine, and he came to me and he said, man, I can't stand that my kid is being bullied in school. And I said, why is he being bullied? Yeah, it's because he's chubby. I said, you allowing your kid to be bullied because he's chubby. Chubby people has always been bullied. It's just how cruel the world is. So you can at least just teach your kid to get in a shape so he will avoid that. And he's just blaming the system. And he woke up. He said, fuck, that's right. Yes, start by you being a good example. You need to be the good example as a father. So I think we need a world where fathers, they step up, and that will create generational transformation.
So is that a sense of, you're breeding the next generation of men that are hopefully better than those before? And you see it a lot where the younger generations surpass the older generations, and there's a piece of me, Mike, that actually think that it should be that way. If we teach them right, then they'll excel and they'll exceed us, and as a result of that, we think 3 or 4 generations of that, we'd be so much further along.
Yeah, but it will come. It's a natural shift, as you said. It's coming now, and I'm probably one of the first movers in my generation to speak about this in this young age, and people will follow. So, the truth will always come. And it's painful to face the truth when you are in completely denial.
Denial is an interesting point, because that must show up in lots of different ways. So what kind of things do boys or men experience, like denial, that possibly we need to shift as well? It might not just be what we've spoken about so far, but maybe there are psychological things that we need to address as well.
Yeah, so I can only use me as an example. I think that's the best to keep it on my court. So I was having this self-deceptional and delusional thoughts about myself. I was looking at Cristiano Ronaldo. I was looking at Jeff Bezos. I was looking at Elon Musk. I was like, fuck, I adore these guys. And here I was taking drugs and eating shit food and cheating on women. I was self-deceptional, which means if someone, I would say something like, I'm working as hard as I can. Or I would say, I'm prioritizing my time as good as I can. I'm doing as much training as I can. I'm eating as clean as I can. No, that's not possible. I need to have. So if I was in a room with Cristiano Ronaldo, it's not that I say we all have to be like him, but he's a fucking great example. But if I was in a room with these guys, they'll be like, fuck you, you're not doing shit. You're not doing shit, which means that us as people, Michael, we compare ourselves with our peers. And just because we are, and just let's look at the average man in today's world. If you are above 30, you will never fucking sprint again. If you are above 30, most men are fat and depressed and they're not doing well. And this is the fact. This is just taken from facts. This is not me just saying you guys are terrible. I'm not saying you guys are terrible. I'm just saying that's a fact. And if you are comparing yourself with the current average, you're not comparing yourself with anything, but you're just blind. You got to compare yourself with your own potential. That's where you start to see the truth. And I saw that in me. And I attacked that. I declared war against myself. And I didn't declare war against myself for me to be validated externally. No, I declared war against myself to be able to validate myself internally on how I conduct myself, how I think about others, how I am when I meet others. So my daughter could have a good example. That's what I did. I think it's the right time, man. And when my book comes out, hopefully my vulnerability is a very vulnerable book. I'm really just putting all my mistakes out there in ways that, in a language and tone that most people can understand. So I'm crucifying myself to say that I was there and I took this journey. And this is just one book of many that I'm going to write about this because I see it as a big problem. In other words, Michael, I've seen men being completely destroyed from a woman that left them, right? A marriage that was broken, and now they are single parents, and every time they pick up their kids, they cry when they deliver them back. And I feel for them because it's tough. But I'm also the first one to say, all right, then look yourself in the fucking mirror, bro. What do you got to offer? I'm not saying you should win her back, but can you see why she left you? In not all the cases, we have crazy people both on the male side and the female side, but in many cases, it's because men doesn't understand that women have hypergamy in them. They will seek the strongest leader. And if you are a comfort, pleasure-seeking couch potato, she's not going to be satisfied. She wants a mature masculine in the house. That's just female energy. And if you didn't take that responsibility, and we men, we have this, Michael, we believe that just because we are married, we deserve to have sex with our wife. Bullshit. If your wife came into the bedroom, if you were in a good shape and she was fat, you will be like, shit, man. You're not doing more for me? And how many men comes in smelling like alcohol and coming home late, never present, never give her love, and come in fat in the bedroom and just expect. My point is just, we got to be responsible, man. We got to understand that we are here to serve, and we're not here to just take. When we can transform that, we're here to serve. I think we're on the right path.
As one last question for you, Mike, I think we could do with having one last piece of advice, because we've covered a lot and it's been fascinating to learn all of this and learn your story as well. What's one final piece of advice that you want to impart on people, men or women, to improve themselves? Maybe it's something we've covered before, but if not, what's the final piece?
I can say it very briefly, man the fuck up. And the reason why I'm saying that is because it's a word that has also been, it's been misused. Manning up means just you take responsibility. And see, men, we are not the entire problem, but we are the freaking solution. As soon as a man steps up as a leader, you shall see how order is placed. So that's my advice, man up.
And for those that would like to learn more about you, possibly grab the book as well when it comes out, how can they do that?
So if they go and find me on Instagram, my name is Mike Radoor. Find me on Instagram, and very soon I will come up with a pre-bundle to my book, Man Up, where you'll get access to a free community and you'll get access to a lot of digital coaching advices, and you'll get the book in pre-sale. They can find me on Instagram. I also do have a YouTube channel, but I think it's better if they find me on Instagram because I'm promoting my YouTube channel there as well.
Thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Those that are listening, feel free to subscribe, share the show, tell others, and also leave a review wherever you are listening into your podcasts. Mike, this has been great. I've enjoyed it, and I look forward to keeping in touch. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Michael.